Photoshop has a ton of filters. No, I mean that seriously. If you took all the filters out of Photoshop and you actually weighed them, they'd weigh over a ton. That's a lot of stuff. There's actually over 100 filters, and they are located under the filter button right here. These are the ones we're going to be talking about in this lesson. Each one of the segments in this lesson will deal with one of these subtopics. With over 100 filters to deal with, I don't want to really spend a lot of time on each one. That would take forever. What I want to do, though, is every once in a while I want to dwell on one or two of these because they've got some pretty cool features associated with using them. Let's start with artistic filters. Some of the things we're working with, not all of them, have the ability to access the filters through the filter gallery. And when that option is there, we'll use it. Now, artistic filters can be done from the filter gallery, so let's go here. Let's take our photograph down to a more manageable size by going here and saying fit on screen. Artistic filters are right here. There are quite a few of them. I'm going to go through them one at a time, explain why you might want to use them. The first one is called Colored Pencil. If we select it here and then turn this layer on right here that now says Colored Pencil, we can see it. The purpose of Colored Pencil is it draws an image using, well, colored pencils on a solid background. Edges are primarily retained, and the edges are given kind of like a crosshatch appearance, as you can kind of see right here. Our options are pencil width. And of course, we can change the width of the pencil that we're using. The stroke pressure, more or less, and paper brightness. Colored pencil. The next one is one of my favorites, and it's called Cutout. Cutout, according to Adobe, is it creates images as if you're cutting them out of sheets of colored construction paper. I look at it as more of a posterization process, but it's a fun filter to work with. For example, the number of levels is the number of pieces of construction paper, or the number of colors, if you will. If we lower that all the way down, we get much less detail. Edge simplicity, if we go to the right, makes simpler edges. And we can keep doing this all the way this way. Edge fidelity will give us more or less detail. Maybe we take simplicity up a little bit. I use Cutout for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons I use it for is to create some interesting backgrounds. Now, I might save, and again, remember what this was. It was a bunch of flowers in Arizona against a mountain. I can actually make some really cool backgrounds using Cutout. It's a fun one to play around with. The next one is called Dry Brush. And the dry brush is basically a technique that paints the edges of an image using a dry brush. It's kind of between oils and watercolors if you're in the painting industry. It will simplify the image by reducing the range of colors. And again, we've got brush size, detail, and texture. And we can play around with these and produce a different image if that's what you're looking for. Film grain. Film grain applies an even pattern to the shadows and tones. That's what it's designed to do. Smoother, more saturated patterns are added in the real light areas. And again, we have grain, the amount of grain, highlight areas, and the intensity of the grain. I use this filter a lot if I'm trying to get rid of the banding effect that sometimes comes along with solid colors, and it will work pretty good. Fresco, again, another painting technique, paints an image in a coarse style, and is using short, rounded paint strokes applied very quickly. At least that's how it's done in the real world. And you have brush sizes, details, and texture. Next one, neon glow. You've got a glow size, a glow brightness, and a glow color. You don't like blue? Choose something else. Come over here, change the size and brightness a little bit. This one can be used in a type of almost solarization, colorization process. It creates some interesting effects. Neon glow. Paint daubs allows you, in a sense, the painting technique of dabbing the paint, and you have a brush size and sharpness and a brush type, actually. Light rough, dark rough, different brushes. This is the simple one right here. You can play around with that one. Palette knife. We use palette knives instead of brushes to apply paint to an image. And your stroke size, a little bit bigger. You can begin to see how the palette knife might work here. Plastic wrap is the next one. I really don't use this one very much. I have used it to generate water effects on ponds and things like that. Other than that, it's supposed to make an item look like it's being shrink wrapped in plastic. Not something, to be honest with you, I do a whole lot. You have highlight, strength, detail, and smoothness. Poster edges, fun one to work with. This one's got a lot of edges, so you're seeing a lot of stuff going on here. But on photographs or images where you have solid areas and edges, it can create a really, well, a poster edge to the image. Rough pastels, again, just like what the name says, pastel paints doing rough, but we have more options here. We have a stroke length and detail. We also have a texture. Now, texture can be bricks, burlap, canvas, or sandstone. If we go back to brick for a second, scaling is how big the bricks are, since we're using bricks. If we make that larger, in a sense, the bricks get bigger. The relief is the intensity of that effect. The light source, you can go from the bottom to the bottom right, bottom top left, whatever you want, or you can just invert it. And that's changing the light source. That's called rough pastels. Smudge stick softens images using short diagonal strokes. And again, it's a painting technique. And you've got stroke length, highlight areas, and intensity. Sponge, I see this a lot on walls in like living rooms where somebody takes a sponge and they begin putting the sponge into the paint and then applying it to the wall. Interesting technique. Underpainting actually paints the image on a textured background and then paints in the final image over it. And the final one is called watercolor. And watercolor paints an image in a watercolor style, obviously, and it uses medium brushes loaded with water and color. At least that's the mathematical equivalent of what we're doing. And of course, you have brush detail and shadow intensity and even texture to apply or to use. Let's do this. Let's say we like this effect, but we can't really get it where we want to. Its intensity is too much. Doesn't matter which one of these you're using. Every one we're going to talk about in this lesson doesn't matter. Click OK. It's more intense than what you want, but click OK. Next thing that you do before you do anything else, because you'll lose the ability to do this if you try something else, is go immediately to the word Edit and go down to Fade Filter Gallery. In Fade Filter Gallery, you have two options. Opacity, and that's the opacity of the effect against the original. Even blending modes, if you want to try a different blending mode, like lighten or screen, overlay, different ones. Let's put that back at normal. I just want this effect less intense. Come over here and drag this way. In other words, I can create more of a painterly effect. It's not quite as intense. If I like what I see, I click OK. Understand, you have to do this immediately after you apply the filter gallery filter. Otherwise, it'll go away. You won't be able to do it. You have the ability with any filter to use that.